As you know, we like to be a bit different with our alternative. After all, it's here to tempt you away from our main three. And this week's car is no exception. Originally launched in 1970 as the GS, this facelifted GSA version arrived in 1979. And although it looks unusual now, at the time the GSA was a revelation. Offering such technological advances as hydromatic suspension, an air-cooled flat-4 engine and an instrument pinnacle that would even make Captain Kirk proud, the GSA really was way ahead of its time. But despite all this technology, the car did have some fundamental flaws, some of which become more apparent with age. For a start, poor paint and panel finish means that rust is a major problem, with floor plans, door sills and rear subframes succumbing very quickly. But don't let that put you off, because the GSA is actually quite a nice little car to drive. Okay, so you have to rev the engine an awful lot to get any sort of performance out of it. The gearbox is a bit clunky, as you can hear. And the steering on this particular one is quite heavy, especially when you're kind of trying to park it. But this car is 20 years old, you have to remember that. Now, many cars look this cool on the outside and on the inside. One thing you have to be careful of in this car is the brakes. Why, I hear you ask, why do we have to be careful with the brakes? Well, they're actually already pressurized, which means you only have to touch the brake pedal for the car to stop. So you don't have to do a lot of pumping to get the pressure up to get any sort of braking in this car. And for a car of its time, that was quite unusual. So it means that if you slam your hard foot on the brake now, this happens. And I'm only touching the brake by doing that, and the whole car nearly shudders to a stop and scares the living daylights out of the car behind me. So when you do get into one of these, especially if it's not your own, remember, touch the brakes. Don't whack the brakes. If you are lucky enough to find a used GSA, you can expect to pay absolutely nothing for a very, very bad example, all the way up to 2 to 3 grand for a minter. The only real problem is trying to find one, because they are becoming rarer and rarer by the minute. So at the end of the day, the GSA makes for a very good second-hand buy. Not alone is it practical and cheap to run, it's becoming more and more of a collectible, which means prices are on the increase. So if you can find one that's been well looked after, my advice is get one, because not alone are they a good investment, but they are also pretty cool to be seen around town.